from one time, in the late 40s and early 50s, and then they said I could colonize in England in reverse. Me a man wrote it said so. What a joyful news, Miss Matty. I feel like my heart bursts. Jamaica people colonizing England in reverse. By the 100, by the 1,000, from country and from town, by the shipload, by the plane load, Jamaica is England bound. Them are pour out of Jamaica. Everybody's future plan is to take a big time job and settle in the motherland. Hey, what a island, what a people.
That phrase coined by Miss Louise Bennett out of Jamaica, that famous poet, colonizing England in reverse, colonization in reverse, in fact. Welcome back to The Big Story. I'm Sean Rose. Now, should all children born in the Virgin Islands be granted automatic citizenship, regardless of the status of their parents? The British Nationality Act of 1948 treated the terms Commonwealth citizens and British subjects as the same thing in 1948. And then all of that changed in 1962 and thereafter, primarily because there was an influx of Caribbean nationals into the UK on that vessel called the Empire Windrush in 1949 and several vessels after that. So immigration control stepped in, and pretty much this is one of the reasons why children who are born in the Virgin Islands cannot automatically get their citizenship. Because if this was 1948, this would not have been a subject of discussion today. Gentlemen, where do we stand? Where do you stand, Sam? What do you think should happen? Are you for automatic citizenship, or do you believe there should be some control?
Well, Sean, I always believe where you're born is where you're from.
What about you, Sawande?
Well, I would have to be in favor of the controls at this present moment. But if we want to give automatic citizenship, things would change dramatically. And many of the people who have access to the Virgin Islands now may not have it in the future.
Stick a pin. What about you, Troy?
I support controls. Sam uses the phrase, where you're born is where you're from. And that's something that I've thought deeply on. If I came from Lebanon and you were born in the BVI, are you from the BVI or are you from Lebanon?
Well, you can't.
And that's the question that we seem to be trying to hit on.
What?
When you say that you are from some place, if somebody said they're from New York, does it mean that they've lived in New York for a period of time, or does it mean that they were just born in New York? Where you're born is your birthplace. Yes. I'm not sure if that's where you're from.
Well, I just want to clarify what Troy just said. He said, if you came from Lebanon, you're born in the BVI. You can't be born in Lebanon in BVI if you came from Lebanon.
Yes.
So where you're born is where you're from. If you're born in the BVI, you're a BVI lander. You can't be a Lebanese born in the BVI.
I qualify that because I'm saying specifically, I meant your parents.
I know what you meant, but I think we should be careful. I said it straight out. Where you're born is where you're from.
So
we have migrants
who
moved to the BVI, and for whatever reason they evolved. And those people had families, and those families, those offspring, should be recognized as who they really are, because they will take on the culture, the attitude, the behavior, the norm of the BVI. And if we embrace them, they are our protectors. They are our next future. They're the people who are going to run our financial services. They're the people who are going to protect us.
But let me interject there quickly, Sam. As all as I know, I've lived in the Virgin Islands all my life. I consider myself, I am from the Virgin Islands. My passport says I was born in the United States. Does that mean I'm from the United States? And I've lived in the BVI. I don't know the United States. Where I know is the BVI. So if you ask me where I'm from, I'm going to say I'm from the Virgin Islands.
But you were born in the USVI or in the US, but you grew up in the BVI.
And that's the question I'm asking you.
Yes.
When you say where you're born is where you're from, I don't know that, if you really think about it, that you can arrive at that as a definite answer. Well, because I know for a fact I am not from Puerto Rico or the United States. I know if you ask me where I'm from, I'm going to tell you.
And I could add to that, because you have people who are born here in the Virgin Islands. This is kind of like the reverse of what Troy is saying. Born here and then immediately leave. I know somebody who was born here, immediately left, went to St. Vincent, and from a cultural perspective, grew up as a Vincentian, no different from anyone else. And you have the inverse is true as well. You have people who are not born here, came here at a very early age, and took on the cultural identity of the BVI. And we can't discount the fact that their parents do play a role in terms of their cultural identity. And that's why many of them, migrants, have dual identities. If you look at the Spanish community, for instance, it's very easy to see because you have the language that's very easy to recognize. Right. So they speak English, they speak Spanish. They're familiar with their parents' culture, and they're familiar with the culture of the BVI. So they're kind of like caught in between almost. And depending on how they are groomed, I don't think it just happens automatically. Depending on how the school system treats them, depending on the efforts of their parents, depending on how the community embraces them, as what you're saying, Sam, is the identity that they will take on. But we can't confuse the passport issue with the cultural identity issue. And the passport issue and whether you get citizenship at birth, in my mind, is more so a practical matter than anything ideological.
So what is the challenge then? Why can't it be done?
The challenge to me seems to be coming from two places. Persons need travel documents. And a lot of persons that are pushing for the passport specifically can't understand why you could be born in a country and you don't have a passport from that country that says this is where I was born and I can travel and return with some kind of clear definition. I support that, and I'm going to use this US reference. I myself, who was born in the United States, a lot of the privileges that I can have access to, I don't have access to those privileges unless I live in the United States for more than 5 years. So I might have the passport, but unless I'm resident in that country for a period of time, I won't have those privileges as other U.S. citizens.
Well, fair enough.
So the question becomes, can we deliver a passport and still have that same practicality that says citizenship won't give automatic access to all the privileges of the British Virgin Islands unless we see that persons have either lived there for 5 years or are interested in living there for a period of time. And so the travel document is a big factor within this discussion, which is something, if you were independent territory, you had the ability to disconnect a passport, which is your travel document, from some of the rights that we want to have accrued to, the different levels of the citizenship.
Yeah, and I just want to interject with what Troy was saying about the passport. A lot of individuals who have children here are unaware of the fact, or I'm not sure if they're unaware or yes, it's not something that's at the front of their minds, that they are entitled to passports from the parents' country. The children who are born here are entitled to passports.
So if you're from St. Vincent,
you're entitled to a Vincentian passport.
You can go to St. Vincent and get a.
And there's
or Jamaica, you go and get a Jamaican passport.
Absolutely.
But the issue that we're looking at here, Shawanda, is whether or not they shouldn't have a BVI passport because they're born here.
Yeah, but one of the reasons we're presenting is that a BVI passport would allow them to travel. But they are allowed to travel anyway because they're entitled to the passport from their home country. And part of it is from...
But they'll have to go and get that first.
Absolutely. They should.
I know this is a key point here.
Yeah.
We have a situation that you've talked about earlier about the policies that the territory has. The challenge comes where you have persons living in the territory for more than 20 years.
Yeah.
And they have not had any kind of a status. So now they have children in the territory. So it seems really ridiculous to the persons who call the BVI their home for the last 20 years, who may not know their original home, to go back to that country to attain a passport or try to re-qualify for those travel documents. When some of those countries themselves might have regulations about how long you have to live within that territory before you are granted some of these privileges.
Well, there's a lot of misinformation, so people, if they want to check, they should check the constitutions. Because there's one person that told me that in Jamaica, they don't issue passports to children born outside of Jamaica, and that was completely false. I mean, very early in the Constitution, it says that all children born to Jamaican parents, regardless of where they are entitled to a passport. So a lot of people are the victim of misinformation.
Because you said something a while ago about children who are born here in the Virgin Islands have the opportunity to get their passport at age 10.
Yes.
Could you discuss that very quickly, because I have a question to ask you.
Yes.
Are you sure about this?
Yes, absolutely sure. I got it from very good source.
Well, is this popular knowledge?
I don't think it is, because first I thought it was 18. But 18 is actually the age that you would have to be naturalized on your own.
Right.
And
could it be deliberate, Sam, that somebody doesn't want people to know that their children can get their passport at age 10? But is this regardless of their parents' status?
Yeah, absolutely. If the parents are what's deemed to be settled, meaning they're not under any immigration controls, they have at least a certificate of residence. Yeah. When they are born, they are entitled to British Overseas Territory Citizenship.
Work permit, that doesn't apply.
If they're on work permit from the age of 10 to 18, they are entitled to British Overseas Territory Citizenship. If the child was living within the territory
consistently.
Those
are the caveats in there.
Without leaving for more than 90 days.
We are running out of time, and I'm going to have to ask the producer to give us some extra time, because we have a gentleman, Mr. James White, coming out, James White Jr., coming out of Montserrat. He has a Montserrat experience that he wishes to share in a very short clip here.
Well, a number of scenarios contend to the situation as it relates to children and the citizenship in Montserrat. Now, if the child is born after December 31st, 1982, note the date, December 31st, 1982, he or she will be afforded the entitlement. Of course, this is contingent on the mother. Note the mother being a Montserratian. If the father is a Montserratian, and the child is born before 2006, the father would have to be married to the mother for this child to be afforded citizenship. This is, of course, if the child is under 18 years of age, right? So the child has to be under 18 years. If the child is over 18 years, then he or she would have to go through the process of what they refer to as registration / naturalization.
Yeah.
If neither parent is Montserratian, I think this is the part that you are most keen on.
That's right.
If neither parent is Montserratian, the process of registration and naturalization would have to be pursued. And this could take the form of the first period of residency, being a resident. And I think as it stands now, I think it's 5 years of living on island constantly for 5 years. I think that is in the process of being changed. But I think it's 5 years as it stands now. And then an additional 3 years after, then that individual could apply for naturalization. There's a legal team and a committee that has been selected to pursue this. Similarly, like the Constitution, to make amendments and so on, we had a committee that was set up with the chairman and other members who looked at it and made or recommend, I should say not made, recommend certain changes. So I think the same process contents. What may contain on the ground in Montserrat might not be the same in the BVI.
Yeah.
No, but I think there should be some harmonization of certain laws that, would deal with the citizenship issue. But we can tweak it or tailor it to suit the individual British Overseas Territory.
Producer at Radio Montserrat, my very good friend James White Jr. But you heard what James said. In Montserrat, they're making some efforts to look at this.
Yes.
You heard the Premier earlier on, along with Mr. Bellingham, saying that they are looking at it. Have you heard anything recently?
I think Bellingham also said that what happens on the ground locally has a lot to do with what the territories are asking for. He said that I think if we review the tape. Also, if you look at the British Nationality Act 1981, under belonger status, it clearly says that territories have some control over local immigration. So I believe personally that a lot of what people are experiencing has everything to do with a local behavior and not necessarily the British Nationality Act, because we're talking about BVI Islanders being recognized as BVI Islanders and afforded all the rights locally so they can do the things that they need to do, represent the country in all the different areas.
So BVI, the Virgin Islands, doesn't need to petition for independence to have this done.
No. If you listen to what the
Any
gentleman
objections?
just said, no, it's not. We're not talking about independence. We're talking about simple rights for all young people to be able to represent the country of their birth.
And
Well, let me interject
answer very quickly, yes.
The whole discussion that we've been having in talking about citizenship and having a passport is interesting because the passports that we hold are guided by the British Nationality Act. So we are sitting here making this decision as though we can have the authority to issue passports without having that approved by the UK. And that's a very important distinction to make, because Billingham not only said that it's under review, which, these things are always under review, but the UK have put this measure in place for their protection,
Yes, as a border control measure.
Border control measure. We have to decide whether we are talking about citizenship of the Virgin Islands, or we intend to grant persons citizenship, the British overseas status citizenship, which we don't have the right to issue. And that's where the question of independence arises.
Because remember, you recently saw the issuance of passports, that physical process moving back to the UK.
But and I have a close connection with. I have a family member.
Because there were some fraud cases.
I have a family member who was born of two parents who are not from the Virgin Islands. They were born in the BVI in Tortola. They left the BVI for some time and has come back to the BVI. They have belonger status. They have been given the card, but they still have to wait until they reach the age of 18, and they have to live in the territory for a 5-year period. So what Sam is talking about in terms of what the local government has the authority to do, that's not accurate. You can give out up to the belonger card and still not have that passport, which is what FIFA is requiring as their prerequisite.
Yeah,
Yes.
and I don't anticipate from the United Kingdom less immigration controls. I mean, they're facing some serious problems in terms of terrorism. I think they're going to tighten up, if anything. And throughout history, you gave the history yourself of terms of the evolution of the British Nationality Act. And you don't see a loosening of controls. You see a tightening of controls as people start to move around more and gain more access to the United Kingdom. So I think if people really want that, they have to seriously consider how much control they have over their own decision making.
I have a question for you, Troy. Why should parents pay to have their child stay here in the Virgin Islands? Pretty much, in other words, if you have a child and that child is born here, you have to pay for the child to live here. If you're not a Virgin Island, then you don't have status.
Well, the question is whether if you have status, you have to pay, versus if you don't have status, if you don't have to pay.
But the issue is the child is born here, and the parent is forced to pay to allow the child to remain.
Only if you don't have status. And
Right.
this goes back to the point that I was making. If you have come to the BVI for 6 months,
Yes.
and you are contracted to work for 6 months on a project, and then you are going to leave, then I don't think it's unreasonable to say that you have to pay, and those things apply.
But in this, yes.
But if you are living in the territory for past 10 years
Yes.
or 20 years, I think it's unreasonable. And that's the point that I think was being articulated by what FIFA was expressing. If you have a child that's born in the BVI,
Went to primary school,
went to
secondary
primary school, went to secondary school, and still can't get a passport or citizenship, he says he can't believe that. And that's the condition that
You
we
said it's
are faced with.
unheard of.
I don't support that either. My only control mechanism is to have a period of time in which we can know whether you're interested in living in the Virgin Islands or not. As long as you've shown that you're interested in making the Virgin Islands your home, barring that you don't have any criminal background or that kind of stuff like that, then I don't...
And some of these people have businesses here.
The process is taking too long.
They're living here. They're not going anywhere.
I could speak to that as well, because there's some controversy involved with it. You had the Complaints Commissioner who wrote a report.
Mr. Georges.
Yeah, speaking about the fact that certain things that were happening in terms of issuing certificates of residence were unlawful, because we had individuals getting issuing residence certificates based on a 20-year standard that has no basis in the law. The only thing the law says is that you have to be of good character and have the intention to reside in the Virgin Islands.
And I think I remember that report, and in some cases some people had applied way in advance, and there were others who came later on behind and got their status even before those who had applied earlier.
Yeah, and in addition to that, the whole question of quotas were introduced, and it turns out that as well was unlawful, and the quotas contributed to a backlog of applications, which people will be here for a long time.
We're out of time, and I know it was a good discussion, but tell me, what are your predictions? What will happen in the very near future and going down the road? Is this thing going to continue?
Well, not in the near future, but I think down the road, I think we will use, I would use Scotland as an example. In 1999, after 200 and something years, almost 300 years, they didn't have a parliament in Scotland. And because of discussion, because of continuous advocacy for change, they were able to get a parliament. So I believe at the end of the day, again and again, if we as BVI Islanders embrace the change that are coming, we can't avoid them, they're coming, and we put forth our best effort, like the guy in Montserrat said, just like how we have the constitutional review, we have a group of people that go around and say, what's best for the BVI moving forward? What's best for us as a country to build a resilient country? I think at the end of the day, we'll see the changes that I'm advocating for.
A multifaceted
society
surrounding
where you're born, where you're from.
Well, I think that the people who are going through this issue, the children who are going through this issue, their children won't go through the issue. So part of the problem that we have here is we just went through a 30, 40-year period of unprecedented growth for the territory in terms of the population. I don't think that can last, because of course a lot of the people who came in, the migrants who came in, and the children who were born here, they now need to get employment. So we have to train them to do the trades and all the other jobs that need to be done. And I don't think you'll see the same scale of immigration. And as time passes, it will become a non-issue or relatively smaller issue.
While you're saying that, we know the trajectory of the immigration flow. We've seen a number of Caribbean nationals and, of course, nationals from the UK and other European countries. Now we're seeing Filipinos coming in and so forth. While you're saying that,
that's true.
Nevertheless,
that's true.
Predictions though, Troy, going forward.
In the short term, I think there's going to be a significant amount of discussion. If we still need the UK to make that decision for us, I don't think it's going to happen. They have been clear that they are not going to give us that authority to give out their British citizenship status to who we decide. I think more like what the Minister of Education has implied is that the BVI is going to have to decide what it is willing to fight for. A lot of countries don't think they want independence, except they want to make the decisions that Sam wants us to make. He wants the territory to have those decisions so that we can make them. But some of those decisions bounce upon whether you want to have your own control. And as the BVI continues to grow and mix, I think we have been set on a path by our foreparents where we want control over a lot of the different things that revolve around the BVI. That includes our immigration status, that includes our citizenship. And I think that we're not going to move forward unless we address that specific issue.
Thank you. This edition of The Big Story examined whether all children born here in the Virgin Islands, regardless of the immigration status of their parents, should be granted citizenship. Special thanks to our analyst Troy Christopher, Shawanda Uhuru, and of course Sam Henry. I am Sean Rose. Thank you so much for listening. Until the next Big Story, thanks for viewing.